Hi guys, and thank you for joining me on yet another vegan culinary adventure. Yeah? So today I want us to look at my favourite street food. This is something I absolutely adore. If you live in East London or around East London or you visit East London, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a naan wrap, an Indian naan wrap with tikka pieces or curry inside and loads of garnish thrown on top and then rolled up, and you just walk around with it in a wrap and you munch on it, and it's so tasty. I've had this so many times and I wanted to make my own recipe and come on YouTube and throw it out to you guys and get you guys to try and see what you think and get some feedback. And I've done the full works. This recipe includes the naan. It's a PESHWARI naan, so it's raisin and coconut. Also the curry, which is a jackfruit curry, and all the garnishes that's going to go on top, like mint yogurt and all of that. So it's pretty long, and as a result I've broken the recipe up into two parts. So today's part one, which focuses on the PESHWARI naan. So I'd love to get your feedback on that, but please watch out for part two, because it'd be great to know what you think of the curry and the naan and all the garnishes put together. So without further ado, this is part one. Coming up, next. So first things first, let's start on the dough. Onto a clean surface, pour 500 grams of wholemeal bread flour and 7 grams of Himalayan salt, and stir together with your index finger. So we want to create a hole in the middle, exactly like what I'm doing here. Then pour in 250 grams of sourdough starter. If you don't have a sourdough starter yet, don't worry, I'm putting a link in the top right corner for a sourdough recipe I did recently where I tell you how to make it. It's really easy, so just check that out. On top of the sourdough starter, pour 250 grams of almond yogurt, and 100 grams of melted coconut oil. So to melt the coconut oil, because it comes in a solid form, just stick it in a bowl and whack it in the microwave for about a minute, and it should be melted and ready to use. So now run your index finger around the inner rim of the flour. This way we can slowly incorporate the flour into the liquid. Then slowly start to push the flour from the outside into the center so we can hydrate the rest of the flour. Then create another hole, just a small hole this time, and finally add 30 grams of date syrup and pour in 100 grams of oat milk, but we want to incorporate the oat milk slowly. Use both hands to incorporate that oat milk gradually. The mixture will look slightly dry, and don't be tempted to add more of the oat milk because it will get softer and wetter as we need. Bring all of the flour together with the bench scraper. And what we're going to start doing is throwing the dough against the table and pulling back on it lightly. This is going to strengthen the gluten. As you can see, the more we work the dough, the stickier and wetter it gets. So this is good, but we have to have that bench scraper to keep scraping the leftover dough back into the main ball, because we don't want that dough to dry on the table. And just continue repeating that process for a good 2 or 3 minutes. So you can see here that the dough's starting to look a little bit more silky and structured. And when we stretch it out, it should be relatively elastic at this stage, but not fully developed. We're just going to knead the ball for a while, about a minute or two, just to get some heat from our palms into the dough, because that really does help develop it. And then once again, stretch the dough out. You can see that it's getting more and more elastic, but it's not at the elasticity we want. So we're going to knead again. And we're going to stretch one final time. Now you can see that the dough has become extremely elastic, almost like a piece of rubber, and it doesn't stick or tear when it's touching the table. So we're done, guys. This is well developed. Bring the dough together, then pull the dough across the table towards yourself, and this will tighten the surface of the dough. And then round it off nicely with both hands. We're going to let this sit for 30 minutes and allow the gluten to relax. So it's just over 35 minutes later. So now we're going to do the final and arguably most important stage of any great sourdough bread, which is the final stretch. This is to like almost fine tune the dough, almost like you're fine tuning a car. So we're going to start by lightly oiling the table. Although the dough isn't that sticky or wet anymore, we're going to be stretching it so thin that it does have the potential to stick and rip when it touches the table. I'm going to use extra virgin olive oil, but you can use any cooking oil, including coconut oil. So now you can take your dough and, like we did earlier, stretch it out with both hands. But this time we really want to work those edges, as well as, like you can see here, stick your hand underneath the dough and slightly tug on the center, just so we can really work the gluten right in the center of the dough. We want to avoid ripping the dough as much as possible, but if it does happen, like you can see I've done here, don't worry too much, it's fine. So you can see that this is pretty well stretched out. We're just going to fold each side onto itself into a kind of letter shape and then roll it into a ball again. Okay, and again, as we did earlier, pull the dough across the table towards yourself and we're going to tighten up that surface again. So pour a tiny bit of oil into a bowl and just use your hands to lightly cover all of the sides. And then we're going to place the dough inside. So cover it for about 3 hours or until it's doubled in size. We're going to turn the oven on now to the high setting, which for me is 250 degrees Celsius. For baking the naan, I absolutely recommend using a Himalayan salt stone because it infuses the naan with this amazing natural mineral rich taste that's just so delicious. I bought mine for about £19. I'm not sure what the price is now, but I highly recommend getting one because you can even put it on the stovetop and fry stuff. It's absolutely phenomenal. But if you prefer to use something you've got at home, just get an oven tray, turn it over, and just put the naan on top of that when we come to bake. It works fine. So whatever we're using to cook with, whether it's the Himalayan salt stone or the upturned oven tray, we want to stick that in the oven now, so when we come to put the naan on it later, it will just start cooking the base immediately. So stick that in now. We also want to put a steam pan in the bottom of the oven. So while the dough's proving, we want to make the filling that will go inside of the naan. So as you can see, I like to have everything laid out in front of me and pre-weighed. This way it's so efficient and so quick. Okay, so into a coffee grinder or food mixer, add 70 grams of sultanas, 30 grams of desiccated coconut, 35 grams of flaked almonds, and 40 grams of melted coconut oil. Again, just melt it in the microwave for about a minute. My coffee grinder is pretty small, so I'm going to mix all these up before I start to add more in. So next, add in 50 grams of coconut cream. This is simply the thick stuff that sits at the top of a can of coconut milk. Just scrape out whatever you need and then save the water at the bottom for something else, a curry or a cocktail, or whatever you fancy. I'm just going to mix this all up one more time, then finally add in 15 grams of Demerara sugar. and mix together to fully incorporate. We want the mixture to be reasonably smooth, because if we have big lumps, the big lumps will actually cut through the dough as we're rolling it inside. Okay, so this is pretty much what we want to achieve. So the dough's been sitting there for 3 hours and it's doubled in size. I can see it's fermented, so we're ready to move on to the rolling. I've pre-prepared 18 pieces of 25cm by 25cm parchment paper squares. These are literally just squares cut out of a big roll of parchment paper. We're going to make 9 naan breads with the quantity we've got here. So start by tearing off a 130 gram piece of dough. I know I'm not using a scale myself, I'm kind of playing it by ear, but on your first attempt it might be a good idea to weigh out that piece. Form the dough into a ball and then flatten it on the table into a pancake. Using a spatula, spoon 26 grams of filling into the center. Again, if this is your first attempt, I do recommend using a scale. Pick up the dough in one hand, then using the thumb, index finger and middle finger on the other hand, pull the edge of the dough upwards and then press it against the next piece of edge. Continue to move across the edge, pressing each piece together and sealing the filling inside. Finally, pull the flap of dough that's in your hand and press it down against the rest of the dough so the filling is absolutely locked in. And now using the thumb and index finger on both hands, delicately press the filling throughout the inside of the dough. Now place the dough between 2 of the pre-prepared parchment squares and carefully using your fingertips, lightly press the dough to the very edges of the paper so it's fully enlarged. It's important to be gentle as it's easy for the filling to be forced out the sides of the dough. So as you see here, we want the dough to reach all 4 sides of the paper. Then leave to the side and continue with the rest. Once you've filled all the doughs and pressed them out to the size of the paper, take everything to the oven. We want to have everything at arm's length once we start baking, because once the dough goes in, we have to work quickly. With a pair of decent oven gloves, take the salt stone out of the oven and place it on a heat-proof surface. Make sure to close the oven door after removing the salt stone, as we want to keep the heat building inside of the oven. You can see just how many naans I've cooked with this saltstone over the years. It's so well used. Okay, so slowly peel off the top parchment paper from the dough and then carefully slap the dough down onto the stone. And then slowly again peel off the second parchment paper. Put the saltstone back into the oven, then quickly take a jug of hot water and pour about 50 grams into the steam pan at the bottom of the oven and shut the door quickly to keep the steam inside. Cook for about 6 minutes, then use a spatula to dislodge the naan from the stone and flip it over. Cook for a further minute, remove, and the naan is ready. So that's the end of part 1. You now have 9 beautiful naans that you can have as a snack or dipped into your favourite curry. But please watch out for part 2, where I'm going to turn these beautiful breads into the most amazing street food snack wrap. As always, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell and you will be updated when that video becomes available. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you all again soon.